Multi-hazards, all about protecting communities.
Hello, wonderful listeners. This episode is where I have an excellent conversation with Brandi Hunter, emergency management expert and founder of Aspiring Emergency Managers Online, AEMO. But first, let's offer up a territorial acknowledgement. We work, study, and live in a region south of the Stalo, aka Fraser River, which overlaps with the unceded traditional and ancestral lands of the Kwantlen, Musqueam, Katsi, Semiahmoo, Tsawwassen, Kikite, and Coquitlam peoples. These are the names of the inspiring First Nations groups who have inhabited this land where I live since time immemorial. This land near me, also known as Greater Vancouver, here on the west coast of Canada. So my guest for today is Brandi Hunter. She is the founder of Aspiring Emergency Managers Online, AEMO, a new and upcoming emergency management professional development community that is dedicated to aspiring emergency managers supported by professional emergency managers. Her vision was to create a resource that united both aspiring and professional emergency managers in all sectors, together with the common goal of motivating future emergency managers that they might become successful in their career endeavors. Brandi's goal is to help others to achieve their goals. And now, without further ado, let's get to the interview. So hi, everybody. This is another Multi-Hazards podcast, and I am so happy to have Brandi Hunter here, and she's the founder of the Aspiring Emergency Managers Online, AEMO, and she is an emergency management expert. And Brandi, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Vin. Thank you.
Okay. Now, I kept wondering, are you in near Seattle or Tacoma? You're in Washington State, right?
That's correct. I'm actually about 40 minutes south of Seattle in Lacey, Washington, about 10 minutes away from Olympia, the capital.
Okay. Now, the reason why I was wondering that is because we've been having heat challenges here in Vancouver, and we've had wildfire smoke challenges. And I think that typically it happens down in Seattle and Olympia and Tacoma too at the same time. Not always, but a lot of times you'll get some of the same weather things and the same stuff. So have you been having that too?
Yeah, so the sky's pretty hazy right now. It's looking a little dingy. You can see the fires coming from Portland or Oregon. So down south, it's coming from there, it's coming from the east. It's all over surrounding us, but it's not as bad as it was in 2020.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we've been having some bad wildfire smoke. Sometimes it'll come and it'll go, so it's kind of weird. How about heat waves?
Oh yeah, so we just had another heat wave. This is our second heat wave of the summer. I don't know what the temperatures were this time, but the first time that we had the heat wave this summer was like in the hundreds, and it was really bad. My yard got burnt up and singed, and I was like really disappointed because I've been working on my yard the whole entire time. And then we had another heat wave that just took my yard out. So it's been pretty bad, but luckily we have AC in our house.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. Now in Canada, we use the metric system here. So when I was a kid, we used 100. So 100, that's like, let's see, 67 is room temperature. That's like 18 degrees. So in the hundreds it's getting way up there. It's pretty bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And all the grass is like yellow, right?
Yeah. Our whole entire neighborhood is just burnt to a crisp.
Okay.
Burnt. Yeah. It's pretty bad.
Well, you don't want to get kids out there with magnifying glasses.
No.
When I was a kid, I had a magnifying glass and I actually set our whole lawn on fire. So
you're an arsonist. Okay, that's good to know.
That was by accident. Anyways, yeah, heat waves don't help. So yeah, and I believe you have wildfires going on there too?
Yeah, so my husband, he's actually out at the wildfires down in North Oregon, well, Northeast Oregon. and they're pretty bad over there, and they're moving all over the place. Washington, again, sky's hazy because of the fires all over Washington right now. It's pretty bad. Yeah.
Okay,
So, but
yeah.
we're getting them under control. And I just heard from a friend that's up north, I think in around Tacoma, that there was a fire out in one of the forests, and the Department of Natural Resources just went and put it out.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, in British Columbia, where we're here, I think the other day I heard we had 400 fires around, and they've had like
Oh,
every 2 or 3 days, they were like, oh, this little town is evacuating, this other little town is evacuating. I'm thinking, whoa, it's
and I
pretty
think that
serious.
Canada is pretty bad with their wildfires and their floods. Is that true?
Sorry, the floods?
Yeah, I heard that Canada has a lot of floods. Maybe that's like in
Yeah, I think
eastern
that's more
Canada.
east.
Yeah.
We're too
Probably so.
busy. And now we're having a fourth wave of COVID here where we are. So I don't know. Are you
Yeah.
pretty good on the COVID front in Washington State?
No, we're not good on the COVID front here in Washington State, unfortunately. And I work for the health department as the planning section chief. And the COVID, we're going through another phase right now. We just put in a mandate for masks to be worn again. Schools are about to be reopening. Influenza season is about to be coming up on us. So, unfortunately, things aren't looking too good right now.
Right. Now, strangely enough, usually for myself, I'm like really nervous about all these things, but I don't know. I've found this sort of Buddhist Zen peace in it all. I don't know.
Oh,
Have you gotten there sometimes or?
no, I haven't. No.
Okay. I know it's unsettling, right? Sometimes it's just like this is thrown at us, that is so, but that's why you got into emergency management, right?
Well, it's funny that you asked that, because when I first heard about Homeland Security Emergency Management, which was at Pierce College, I was in my early 20s, and my dad said, "Hey, you should probably get into this program. In the next few years, it's going to be, something that's going to be a thing, a career field." And I looked at him because I was like, "Yeah, okay, whatever." And then as I got older, into my 30s, we'll say, I looked at it again, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna give it a chance. And then when I started to learn about what emergency management really was, and I realized, okay, I don't have to touch blood, I don't have to touch any bodily fluids, but I can still help people. I really became interested in it. And then to hear about all the disasters that emergency managers respond to and recover and plan for, I was really excited about it. And I wanted to be a part of that, as I wanted to help the community in any capacity that I could.
Right, right. Okay, so that was like say 3 or 4 years ago that you started the journey into EM.
Well, I actually graduated from the Homeland Security Emergency Management Program at Pierce last year in August.
Okay.
And I started the program in about September of 2019.
Okay. Wow, that's awesome. Now, I've met you sort of virtually on LinkedIn, and I notice you're super busy there, and you're not wasting time. You're not like posting pictures of cats or beavers or squirrels. You're actually, doing the work that in your field on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
And I'm just wondering, what's your experience there been like?
I love LinkedIn. I don't even know how I got on LinkedIn. Um, I had a LinkedIn account years ago and never really got involved in it because I wasn't too sure how to use it. In about 2020, I got onto LinkedIn. Again, not really remembering how or why I got onto it that time, but I ran into a gentleman by the name of John Hallage, and he is an emergency manager, and he told me how to network on LinkedIn and who to connect with and how to post questions that are related to emergency management. And when I did, he said, tag these individuals that are in Seattle. And I did. And I got a flood of questions, a flood of answers to my posts. And from there, I just became addicted. And that kind of sounds weird that you can become addicted to LinkedIn, but when you're in some kind of profession and you love your job and it's a passion and you're looking to expand your network, LinkedIn is like the perfect platform to do so.
Wow, that's wonderful. Maybe you're gonna have to give me some lessons, because sometimes I'm on LinkedIn and like it's kind of like shooting out arrows, and you're wondering,
Yeah.
or putting fish hooks in the river, and you're like, am I gonna catch a fish with this or not? Or is it gonna come back
Yeah,
in?
it's a hit or miss sometimes, but it's still fun either way.
Yeah, well, all I can say, it's better than Twitter. Like in Twitter, people actually swear at you and call you names, but at least on
Yeah.
LinkedIn, generally people are pretty civilized to each other.
Yeah, I haven't branched out. Like I've tried, Twitter, but it's not my jam yet. Maybe one of these days, but just it's not growing on me at all.
Yeah, well, on the thing on Twitter, I think people have anonymous accounts, so they just say whatever because they think they'll never be caught. But on LinkedIn, at least there's accountability. You have to put like your real name and your real background there, sort of like your resume. And so
Right,
I think that's accountability kind of keeps people in check most of the
right.
time.
That's very true. Yes, that's very true.
So I'm just wondering, in general, networking, you believe it's super important, especially this kind of professional networking. How would
Mhm.
you define it?
Well, I mean, it could be defined in a lot of things because you can go out, face to face with people and network. You can be at your own job and network. You can, well, be at a conference and network, and then be on social media and network, like on LinkedIn and Facebook and even Twitter. It can be a form of networking. And all it is just branching out to people and letting people know what you're doing and they are supporting or, connecting you with other people in the field. Network goes way beyond, just social media.
Right. And do you think it's networking, it's kind of, what do we call it, multi-pronged, because sometimes you're just dealing with somebody on LinkedIn, that's it, only LinkedIn. And then sometimes, maybe you would meet them on Zoom and have a Zoom call, or
Mhm.
maybe if they're living not too far, you can have a coffee with them.
Right, right. Yeah, just like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be on social media. You can be even in your workplace and network.
Right. And we
So
remember the days before COVID when that was actually a normal thing that people were doing, right?
it was, and I miss it so much because that's exactly how I got my start. Yes, there was LinkedIn, but then my first networking event was at a business continuity event in Seattle where I got to meet other emergency managers and business continuity professionals. And I haven't been to one since last February. Well, last February of 2020.
Okay. Yeah, that's a long time. Now, I'm just thinking here, we might have some people who are listening in who don't know what the heck emergency management is, right? Is it just
Mhm.
like managing emergencies? And because even myself, I didn't know, like before 2018, I didn't know what the heck this field was.
Mhm.
So I'm just, what is your definition of EM, or emergency management?
So emergency management is such a broad field. I mean, you can say, well, they respond, recover, and plan for emergencies, but they're not your typical EMS or emergency medical services or EMT, emergency management, or emergency manager, technician, or nurse, or people who are firefighters. I mean, they come from those fields. Some of them do, and some of them come from the military. But I think that emergency management is just the people who it's a conglomerate of individuals who respond to a whole community. It's not just like it could be the public sector, it could be the private sector, it could be cybersecurity, it could be public health. I mean, it's an array of different backgrounds that come together to help one community or many communities to overcome a catastrophe of events.
Okay. Now, do you think this sort of big tent definition or reality of emergency management, do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it's a great thing.
Okay. And
Yeah.
why is that?
Because it's a bunch of different individuals or organizations that come together with one common purpose. and that is to make sure that the community that they're responding to or recovering, helping to recover, is resilient and can bounce back. Whereas, smaller communities or rural communities, they might have a handful of people and it's a little bit harder, but emergency management is so much bigger than that.
Okay. Yeah. The reason I asked that question is that just in the last 3 years, I found that it seems that there's a lot of silos happening.
Hmm.
And for example, yeah, you might get like we had some big conference I went to back in 2018 in Vancouver, and we had people from the health field. And I don't know if we had anybody from cybersecurity field. We had different fields represented. But it seems like when you're not at a conference, that a lot of times these fields are operating very individualistically. They're not really collaborating like they should. So
Hmm. Yeah.
sometimes I wish that there were a
Hmm.
lot more kind of cross pollination happening. So, what do you think of that?
Right. And I totally agree with that, because even in my response, and I don't want to say too much about it, but like, responding is very challenging, when you have a bunch of different organizations that have different ways to respond, but then there's ICS, which is supposed to make things less, complicated. Um, but when you have a different way of approaching or a different mindset, it can make responding just that much more challenging and that much more of a headache. I mean, I'm just being honest with you, because it's something that I'm going through right now with COVID-19. But, if you all have the same focus and the same purpose, eventually you'll get there. Eventually you'll get to recovering and helping the whole community. But in that aspect of everybody coming from a different cloth, it's going to be a bit of a challenge.
Right.
But you got to look past that.
Yeah. Now, but for networking, especially when you're trying to like find out about one of the fields, like how does that work? Because for example, you might be networking for health emergency management, and then you might be networking more for like some people more the technical or the engineering side, and then other people are more the kind of like the running out there and responding and rescuing people and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it gets a little complicated, don't you think?
No, I don't think it really gets complicated, because inside of responses and inside of recovery, and like you said, there's different people that come from different organizations and different backgrounds. So you might have somebody, for example, who is cybersecurity, but they're not just, oh, I'm just cybersecurity, but they're cybersecurity for the state. So,
Okay.
or they might be cybersecurity for a public or a private organization like Google or something. So it's all different realms within a field. So you're going to get different backgrounds. So when I'm talking to, like, let's say somebody from cybersecurity, it might be somebody who is from Google, and then I might talk to another person who's in cybersecurity, but they're in healthcare, and they're doing healthcare information technology or something, management technology. So it's different um, interests within a different field, if that makes sense.
Okay. Now, say when you're trying to find out about these fields, right? You're networking. So, is there like different phases of networking? Like, for example, we're doing phase one. I got to figure out which part of this field I belong to. Do I want to do the more technical? Do I want to do the more healthcare? Do I want to do more the city hall kind of stuff? And then maybe phase two is you finally figure it out, and now I'm going to kind of narrow in. Is that how you see networking? It kind of
Yeah,
goes
you
from the
kind of you
broad
start
and
to
then more specific later.
right.
Hmm.
Yeah, you first you start off broad, and you're like, okay, well, okay, I have an interest in emergency management, and that's fine. Okay, now I have an interest in response, which is great. But there's a lot of different entities and a lot of different areas that respond to emergencies. And it can get so narrowed down to like aviation, it can get narrowed down to pets, and then you start narrowing it down to your specific interests. as you go and you network further and further. It's like you're going down a rabbit hole a little bit when you're networking.
Okay. So how about you for your journey? Like, where did you start out, like broadwise, and then how have you kind of narrowed in?
I am still trying to narrow it down because I'm interested in everything right now. So it's a
Okay.
little bit difficult for me to sit there and say that I'm narrowing it down. I see one thing and I'm like, ooh, that's nice. I want to do that too. Oh, that looks like it's fun. I want to do that too. So I really haven't narrowed it down, but I've narrowed it down to emergency management.
Okay, that's great. Because, for example, like the four pillars of emergency management, let's see. First one is mitigation, right? Isn't it?
Yes. Hmm.
Okay, so mitigation, then there's preparedness. Let's see if I remember them all. Then there's response and recovery. Okay, so they call them four pillars. Like for myself, I found out that I don't really want to be called, at 11 p.m. and they're like, oh, get in your car, your truck the next morning and drive out somewhere responding. It's like, I think, well, probably a lot of people doing that anyway. Let them enjoy that. But I would rather like get into mitigation and preparedness. I don't know if that's kind of a lazy way out, but I don't know. You heard people like that?
Yeah. So, well, let me go back and I really don't, and I'm going to have to disagree with you a little bit on your response and mitigation, because everything is not always in the field. People are under the impression that emergency management is always in the field and you're going somewhere responding to some sort of physical disaster. Um, and that's not necessarily true, because you might be responding, and a lot of times you're responding behind a desk. And the people that you're talking to are like the Red Cross and these other entities, and their people are actually going out. And even mitigation, you're talking about like GIS, which is geographic information systems. And sometimes, yes, they might go out and they might fly around looking for landslides or potential landslides or what have you. But then you have other people who are in mitigation and they're working behind a desk and they're working on grants. So there's different things about those phases that you're talking about. And that's where we're talking about like going down that rabbit hole and narrowing things down. But when you're thinking so broad like that, or not even broad, it's kind of narrow. You're narrowing it down to like, I'm only going to go respond outside in the field. That's not realistic. Emergency managers, for the most part, aren't out in the field. They're actually behind a desk most of the time.
Okay. Yeah, I guess the reason why I'm saying that, I've been volunteering and I put myself I shouldn't have done it. I put myself for the season, right? And then they're like sending like especially this summer, there's like so many wildfires and so much stuff happening. It's like every like 3 days, I'm getting this alert. And I'm like, whoa. So
Yeah.
anyways, I just found out if you're a family person, you got to keep care of people at home. It has to
Right.
you have to have your sort of ducks in a row if you're gonna end up packing your vehicle and then going out to another place. So but that's an entire field. People, they will be ready for that, right?
Right.
Right. So I'm wondering about networking here, and like, does it change? Like you already talked about that. You're saying, okay, when it's broader and then you get more specific, but the way you talk to people and the questions you ask and maybe the kinds of people that you network with, does it change as you're going from the sort of the broad to the more specific?
Um, yeah, I guess it would change. I don't know what you mean by change. If you could like clarify a little bit.
I mean, for example, like when you're going broad, right?
Hmm.
It's almost like the person is like a career counselor for however long the conversation goes, because they're telling you a lot of their opinion about the field broad. But when you sort of know what you really want to do and you're networking, you're actually trying to get like this more valued kind of information that you're not going to be able to find on Google, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So
Yeah, the
just
conversations can change a lot. Um, what I found is that when I'm networking, a lot of people will start off broad, but as you get to know them a little bit more and they get more excited about their field, because everyone has a field or an interest and stuff like that, and then it becomes a little bit more specific. And then that's where you can start finding the golden nuggets out of that information and like determining whether or not that field is something that you might be interested in. So the conversation can change depending on if you're asking broad questions like what do you like about the field of emergency management, you know, versus, you know, we're at an emergency management. So the more questions you ask, the different response, a different response you're going to get.
Right. Okay. Now, the other thing about network too is kind of like, I guess there's like, I'm thinking right now, three scenarios. One is you kind of like bump into people somehow, some way. I guess when there's no COVID, it's a lot easier to bump into people, right? It's kind of what they call a happenstance,
Yeah.
or some people might call it serendipity. And then a second one is where you just do the cold calling. You say, okay, I'm just going to like reach out to this person and they might not, you know, respond. And then the third one is where you have somebody will actually say, you know, I will reach out to that person on your behalf and I'll try to set it up so that they can talk to you. So that's kind of, you have a middle person. So I bet there's more categories, but I'm just wondering, what do you think of the difference between these categories when you're networking?
They're all different. Ones are different or have different talents to them. I find that people who are connecting me with other people, it's a little bit more of a win because now you're able to have somebody vet you and vouch for you and say, I know this person and you should talk to them, versus reaching out and like, I guess, cold calling a person and then asking them questions. And then they're like, well, who is this person? I've never heard of them before. And then they're apprehensive about answering any of your questions. And then chances are they just might not even answer any of your questions and respond to you at all. So it varies like how you're trying to network and the response you're going to get. And then sometimes the response, depending on how you're asking the question or what questions you're asking, that network as well matter. So you have to be very cautious of not asking just, you know, typical boring questions, but you want to get down to that person's job field or interest and start asking them very specific questions to engage them, to make them want to ask you questions. Whereas if you have somebody who's just, you know, connecting you with somebody, they're not going to ask you your questions. They're just going to connect you. And then that might even just be an awkward connection altogether. So everything just is kind of like 50-50, if that makes any sense. I mean, you never know how someone's going to receive you if you're trying to reach out to them.
Right. So have you made any big blunders in your network and then you had to learn from them?
You know, when I first started out, I reached out to anybody and everybody, and I really didn't care whether or not, like, I just said, you know what, I'm going to reach out to this big wig person in EM. And they didn't respond to me because they didn't know who I was. And that's one thing about networking is people are not going to be inclined to talk to you, you know, even if you might have an interest in emergency management, if they don't know who you are, you know, or if you're on LinkedIn especially, or on a social media page and there's nothing on your page that reflects who you are as a professional. You know, you have to kind of sell yourself. And then that way, that person who you're trying to network can look on your page and say, oh, okay, they're an aspiring emergency manager. Let me connect with them. I see why they're reaching out to me. But as far as blunders, yes, I've had those before where again, I've reached out to people thinking that I can just get a response, and I haven't. So I've learned not to um, throw my net out too wide and kind of just go for the people that are closest to me and not expect everybody to respond.
Right, right. But it does take some risks and dares sometimes, right?
It does. You never know who might actually be, willing to engage with you. I've reached out to people that I thought, okay, they're never going to ever talk to me. But again, you have to come with the right questions. You have to come in with the right introduction. And surprisingly, I've had some really good contacts with some people that I was surprised that ever responded to my reaching out. So you got to take a risk. It never hurts.
Right, right. And what do you think about preparation? Like I found in my own networking, like I try to read up on that person, read up on their company, read up on their field online as much as I can. And
Mhm.
yeah, just do all that groundwork before I reach out, because if they say yes, then you better be ready, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like looking for a job almost. When you go in for a job interview, you want to go in there knowing something about the company. You don't want to go in there just kind of like, hi, my name is Brandi, and I don't know anything about you. I just know that I want to work here. When they ask you, well, why do you want to work for this company? Everybody wants to know why you're reaching out to them. You don't want to come there with nothing in your hands, nothing to offer, nothing to ask. When you're reaching out to somebody, come up with some really good questions, engaging questions, and then when they respond, you have to just come back with more questions. You should come back up with more questions, to keep the conversation going, to keep yourself memorable. Because ultimately, the purpose of networking is not just to, know someone's name, but so that way they can be possibly a mentor, can connect you to somebody further in the field. And these relationships that you're building in the network can potentially extend into your own profession. So don't go in with the intention of just meeting somebody and shaking a hand and saying, well, thank you for the information and walking off. Go there with the intention of creating a relationship.
Okay. So you do a lot of follow up with these people that you initially contact, right?
Of course, yes, you should. You should always follow up with whoever you're talking to. Sometimes it's a little hard because that person again might not be receiving you well. They might give you a very like yes or no, or but you want to give them an open-ended question where they are engaging you and answering your questions to the fullest. So that way you can come back and ask more questions, and then they're enticed to keep the conversation going. And then, like for instance, you're on LinkedIn, they say, well, let's move this conversation to a Zoom, or here's my email. And once you get that conversation going, it's kind of like you're in from there.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Now, moving on to mentoring. So, mentoring is actually a whole different level than networking. It's a bigger commitment level, et cetera, et cetera. So, I'm just wondering, like, how do you define it, Brandi? And how do you think it's different from, say, regular teaching or training?
So mentoring is a relationship. It's not one where it's like a friendship. It's more based on a professional relationship. I kind of think of Mr. Miyagi when I think of a mentor, somebody who sees you as a potential um, person that is going to thrive. They believe in you. They want to help you. In your career or your goals. I've had some really great mentors in the past year as of joining LinkedIn, and they have supported me throughout this whole entire process of me being a student and now me being in a career of emergency management, and even helped me get into emergency management. So it's very essential when you're in EM to have a mentor. Like, I think it's outside of just having a really good resume. because anybody can have a really good resume, but your mentor should be somebody who can vouch for you, somebody who can say, yeah, this person, oh, and then that person who's your mentor is in emergency management too, or the field that you're looking to go into, and they can say that you are a person of value and X, Y, and Z, because that mentor is already going to be in emergency management and they're already going to have connections that trust him or her and their word. And so they're going to say, all right, we can see that this person is going to be of value because if you trust them, we can trust them. And then more so then is that mentors also give you opportunities that they, not even just job opportunities, but they can help you build your resume, build your experience, and build your skills or build your interviewing skill sets. And then teach you a little bit more about emergency management. And they're more open to help you versus somebody who you just networked with and you just found on some social media or in some conference room or something like that. But mentors are a relationship, a strong relationship. And it doesn't have to be somebody that you speak to every day. It could be somebody you speak to once a month, once every 2 months, or what have you. It's not even a mentor. It doesn't even have to be somebody you even seen face to face. I have mentors I've only seen one time or never at all, and just on Zoom.
Okay. Now, what's your advice for finding a mentor?
My advice for finding a mentor is just, I mean, it all starts with networking. I mean, that's how I found my mentors. And then also posting on LinkedIn and posting engaging content. But again, you can find mentors anywhere. You can find a mentor just like you find somebody that you're networking with, and that person that you're networking with ends up being your mentor. I've had mentors from as far back in my 20s, from when I was in the school district. And even though they're not actively in my life right now, I can still reference them and go back to them right now, and they'll still be what I consider a mentor in this profession. So you just going out and talking to people, finding out the same interests. I mean, mentors, they just kind of fall in your lap. It's not something, I mean, you have the mentorships where you have to sign up for, and then they link you up with a mentor. There's that type of mentorship. And then you have the organic mentors where, like I've had, where you don't have to pay for them and they're free and they just believe in you and they want to help you.
Right. Now, have you seen, there's a kind of mentor I thought was kind of cool, and that it's not somebody who's like maybe in their 60s, but it's somebody who's just like a little bit ahead of you in the field, maybe 2 stages ahead of you, and they have a lot of fresh information. Because I did find that some of the people who are maybe at the end of their careers, they're good for some general advice, but they don't actually know what's going on for like the beginning stages of a career, because they're sort of in the twilight of their career. So you know what I mean? The difference between these two?
I do know the difference between those two. Fortunately, I've never ran into anybody like that. Emergency management is a really relatively new field. So anybody who says they can't remember that far back, I would be kind of uh hard pressed not to believe them, because emergency management it hasn't been around that long. And everybody,
Okay.
for the most part, I know remembers their first day.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Right. So now AEMO, it's let me see, aspiring emergency managers online. So first of all, what does the word aspiring here mean?
It just means somebody who wants to be and is looking towards and actively working towards becoming, and it doesn't necessarily have to be an emergency manager. It can be a nurse, it can be a pilot. It's just a person who wants to be and is working towards being that type of individual or that type of profession.
Okay. And it also can include people in, say, the first year, second, third year who are in their
Yeah,
field?
Right. And, aspiring, when I asked people what aspiring meant to them, a lot of people really consider themselves, even though they were in emergency management for more than 5 years, some of them 10 to 20 years, uh, they can still consider themselves to be aspiring because, they aspire to be the best emergency manager. But I kind of look at aspiring emergency managers as people who have 1 or 0 to 3 years, maybe even 5 years of being in emergency management. They are still green behind the ears. They still are learning the ins and outs. Yes, emergency management is a very complex field, but this is for people who are maybe getting out of school, people who are transitioning from another career into emergency management, have never touched it at all. And that to me is somebody who's an aspiring emergency manager.
Okay. And what kind of motivated you to start this group?
The lack of the resources, the lack of the networking. Yes, there was IAEM, and all these other emergency management conferences. But when I was in school, working on my Homeland Security Emergency Management degree, I had never heard of International Emergency Management Association. I've never heard of that. The only thing I had heard of was FEMA. I hadn't heard of, you know, these other associations that were out there. I hadn't had the opportunity to network, especially once COVID happened. But I wanted there to be a place where, first initially, where other aspiring emergency managers could come together and conversate about their ups and downs at becoming an emergency manager. When I was in school, it was all online, so there was no face-to-face contact with my classmates, which was a little bit unfortunate. And so, whereas, when you're in other programs, you kind of grow with your classmates, and in this program, it didn't really feel that way. So I wanted to find a way where we could all network and then maybe get together outside of online courses and go to network events, but then COVID happened. And then also look for resources that, I found a little bit hard to find, or maybe the college didn't tell you about, and that I found out through LinkedIn. And then throughout COVID and throughout those months and thinking, I decided to create a LinkedIn group to bring together aspiring emergency managers. And I thought maybe 50 people would join, but then it ended up being 100, then 200, then 300. And now we're at over 2,200.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is
Okay.
within a year.
Yeah, that's awesome. Haven't you had any like face-to-face events with this yet, or?
Not yet. Not COVID's not allowing us to have a
Oh,
lot of
yeah.
things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if you did, I think you could have some events like in different cities, right? If there's,
Right.
okay. Wow,
Yeah,
that
we've
is so
considered
awesome.
it. I have talked to other organizations about it, but again, COVID, it just keeps coming back or keeps staying, not coming back. It won't leave. And it's just not allowing us to get there, but eventually we'll start to have face-to-face interactions.
Okay. That's awesome. I'll tell you a secret. I was actually trying last summer to start an organization like this in Canada, but
Hmm.
it wasn't like online basis. I
Hmm.
uh, because I knew there's people in the sustainability field, environmental sustainability. They had this organization in different major cities in Canada where they would actually, this is before COVID, of course, they would have like monthly meetings and they had membership. And I thought, wow, that would be great if we can get something Canada wide going for this. But I just couldn't get any traction. I talked to some people over the phone and I just couldn't get any traction. And I
Hmm.
thought, there's always this conflict between, fulfilling your own urgent needs and then trying to do something for the greater good and other people. Right. So,
Right.
So maybe later, but we'll
Maybe
see.
later. Yeah, definitely. I think that there's going to be a real shift here. Um, Again, emergency management is new, and there's so many territories within this field that haven't even been found, or that are
Hmm.
unknown, that have gaps, and that need those gaps to be addressed and filled. So you never know, and then there's other countries that don't even have emergency management yet, and then there's companies that don't even know what emergency management is. So there's a lot of work to be done, and you
Yeah,
never know.
there sure is. Now, a question though, like I kept thinking in the last, say, 3 years that with all the storms and the wildfires, and then there's wildfire smoke, and then there's COVID, floods, there's so much going on, right? And you think, they really need to, I mean, all these different entities, they need to hire a lot of younger people, fresh blood to get into these fields to deal with it all, right? Has that thought ever come into your mind?
Um, I think the older and the newer both need to come together to work in these fields, because the older have their experience and the younger can come with their innovation. I wouldn't say that we need a whole entire, you know, field of new emergency managers. I just feel like it has to happen. I mean, that's just the way it is. Old out with the old, in with the new. New people have to come in, and they have to learn from the old generation, or the experience. I don't want to say old because people might take offense to that. The experienced emergency managers, and then reinvent what they learned and bring in new ideas and thoughts to the forefront of emergency management, because again, there's holes and there's gaps there that the more experienced emergency managers can't see anymore, because they've been here for so long and they've built some of these um, areas that they can't see the gaps. And then plus, they're on their way out. Whereas you got fresh eyes, new, and the younger people are coming in here, and times have changed, and so they're needed right now. But they need to have some kind of guidance from the experienced emergency managers.
Right, right. I get that. So now, do you feel that AEMO, do you have kind of ideas that, I mean, it's hard to predict what COVID is going to do and everything, but do you have some kind of vision for it that you like to bring it into a new stage?
AEMO is like, just, it's going wherever it wants to go,
Okay.
and I've said this before at the beginning in other interviews. I don't know where AEMO is going. It's kind of like its own beast, and it's saying, okay, we're going here now, and I'm just following along with it, and whatever the need is, that's what we're doing. People say, well, what is your vision for AEMO in the next year, next 5 years or so? And I honestly, I don't know. The whole entire goal for AEMO is to help other people reach their goals. And I think that's always going to be a thing, and how we do it is always going to change depending on the need of emergency managers. So what I want for AEMO today might not be the need for it tomorrow. So I don't know.
Right. Okay. Now, what do you think about people who are considering a new field? Like, what kind of advice would you give them?
Can you say that one more time?
So, for example, there might be some listeners who are coming onto this program now, and they're thinking, okay, yeah, I need to do more networking, and I need to find a mentor, and I want to consider a new field. It could be emergency management, it could be another field. But what kind of advice would you give to those people who are considering a new field?
That's outside of emergency management.
No, it could be any field.
Oh, well, get a mentor, research it, look it up. I would shadow people that are in that field. I have a 17-year-old who has just graduated from high school, and right now she wants to be a dentist. And yesterday she wanted to be a nurse. And my recommendation to her was like, you need to start shadowing people. You need to start calling people up that are already in the field and asking them questions about the field to determine if that's something you really want to do. Because you can look it up all online all you want to, or you can watch it on TV and it might entice you. But when you hear it from an actual person and you actually go in and shadow that, it'll give you a different perspective. Granted, you might not see the whole entire spectrum of it, but it'll give you a better idea versus where you're just thinking about it and looking at like other people online talking about it. So I would suggest shadow the person or a person or a couple people within that field and see if that's something that you would like, and then also start building a mentorship or a mentor relationship with that individual or people that are in that field.
Right. That's so important because it's funny. We've had the internet for like more than 25 years, and we think it's kind of this little genie in the bottle. We just rub the bottle and genie will give us the answers. But for example, I think in emergency management and many fields, you can't really get the real information on the internet. It's just not there, right? It looks like it
No,
might be there, but when you start actually talking to people, it's like, hey, there's a lot of secrets out there that they're not
there
putting on the
is.
internet. Right?
And I, even if you go to school to learn about something, you're never going to know about it until you're actually in it. I've learned a lot about emergency management, or not a lot, but I've learned enough about emergency management. But actually now having a career in emergency management is totally different than what I've learned in a book. You know, it's way different, and you're just going to have to ask people and get into it. And that's why another thing I want to recommend, Vin, is if you're trying to get into emergency management, is to intern or to volunteer. So that way you can get the experience. That's just as important as finding a mentor, because even if you volunteer and intern, you can probably find a mentor in that environment as well. But then you're also gaining the experience, and you're not going out into a field blind thinking that, oh, this is how it's going to be because I read it in the books. Because it's
Right.
not going to be that way.
Right. Right. Exactly. But one thing about emergency management is that it seems that you cannot volunteer for a lot of the job, what do they call it, the job specifications that you want to. For example, I found in my city, like you can like help evacuees, you can, learn, you can go to some trainings and stuff, but there are certain parts of emergency management where you're not going to be able to touch it as a volunteer. You have to be a paid worker, right? Do you
Right.
agree
Yeah.
with
You're
that?
not going to be a deputy incident commander as a volunteer. Maybe you might. I don't know. But I've never seen it. Not yet. Um, but yeah, just because there's safety reasons behind it, pay, the compensation. I don't know. There's probably various different reasons, but just getting the basic understanding of what emergency management does is better than nothing. And even if it means that you gotta volunteer for the Red Cross, which there's nothing wrong with that. Everybody is
Mm-hmm. Right.
a-okay with the Red Cross.
Yeah.
I volunteered for the Red Cross, and I have some mentors from the Red Cross that have helped me immensely. So, there's nothing wrong with just going and mentoring at the bottom, if that's what you want to call it. Because again, it's better than no experience at all. And if you put it on your resume, people will respect that.
Right, right. And you always have to go for the opportunity. There might be some chance or opportunity you'll get to do more, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah. People might promote you. They might see that you're a good worker, or, that you're consistent, and dedicated. And then that might lead into a job, and you might be doing a little bit more, like you said, Vin. You never know. Don't shut that door of opportunity down because it's not paid.
right, exactly. So, Brandy, I'm just wondering, you're doing a lot of things and you're pretty like open on LinkedIn. I'm just wondering, what is your next iron in the fire, so to speak?
I'm thinking about going back to school. That's
Okay,
my next
again?
one.
Okay.
Again. Well, I don't like to say again, but I need to. It has to happen. I don't want to not go back to school because learning for me is essential, especially when
Uh-huh.
you're an emergency manager. You always have to keep learning. You never want to just sit there and be stagnant.
Okay.
So my next mission is to get back into school and to accomplish my next goal.
Okay. Wow. So master's degree or something?
We're working towards something right now.
Okay. All right. It's really funny though about schooling, right? It's just
Hmm.
you really have to consider like your personal life, your family life, your finances, your uh time scheduling, the job you're
Right.
doing now. There's just a lot of factors, right? And then also you got to think about like, if I get such and such a degree, is it going to actually give me some traction once I'm in the field? Like, will it be respected? Will it help me to get advancements in my career? So there's a lot of factors before you make that plunge, right?
Right. And it might not necessarily be a degree. It could just be, a certification of some kind because, there's still business continuity professional certifications. There's healthcare and emergency preparedness certifications. There's all kinds of certifications that one can earn while being an emergency manager. And one of the most important ones that I'm looking towards right now is project management.
Okay. So it's like what they call it PMP, right?
Correct.
Okay, that's awesome. Now, Brandy, I'm just wondering, here's my last big Kaluha question is what are your dreams and what impact would you like to make over the next few years? I guess that's two questions, but you can take it as one.
Again, my goal is to help other people reach their goals. I mean, that's my biggest impact. That's my biggest next to do on my list. It's not even a bucket list anymore because I'm doing it right now. So, I mean, as long as I can get more than just maybe one or two and I can see the results, I mean, that's always a good thing. It's a motivation thing. But I mean, that's pretty much it right now. Is
Okay.
how can I help other people to attain their goals?
Wow, that's awesome. That's very awesome to have that sort of the common good in view. That's just
Hmm.
beautiful. I'm really, I admire that. So thank you so much, Brandy, for coming to the Multi Hazards podcast. And
Yeah.
I hope that you really enjoy your week and take care.
Thank you, Van. Thank you for having me.
And that's it. I'm so inspired by Brandi Hunter. Thank you so much, Brandi, for being with us as a guest here today at the Multi Hazards podcast. And an important disclaimer here. First, this podcast is meant to be educational and does not try to offer legal, medical, or other specific professional or expert advice unless otherwise noted. Second, the opinions expressed here do not necessarily reflect those of the organizations that either my guests or I are working with. So, here's I conclude this episode. Thanks to each one of you, my precious listeners, for being with us here today. Stay safe out there and stay tuned for more episodes. This is Vin Nelson wishing you the best on your journey of surviving and thriving with all that life throws at you. Cheers to you all. Peace out.